everybody. I'm going to just get started. I'm Cindy Eckert. I'm the founder and CEO of Sprout Pharmaceuticals. My career has spanned from big pharma to ultimately starting pharmaceutical companies from scratch, selling them, getting this one back that I'm leading today. And I'm really excited to talk to you about how important DTP has been to us, how our partnership with Deepak and team has been for us, and why we considered that. We'll share kind of lessons learned.
Well, thank you, Cindy. It's been a true honor to partner with you and your team for the last 5 years, taking Addy direct to patient. By way of introduction, Deepak Thomas. I'm the founder and CEO of Phil. My professional background is primarily taking what were internet businesses and bringing them on to mobile. That's everything that I've done before I started Phil roughly 10 years ago. There is a personal aspect to doing this job that's worth mentioning, because right before I started Phil, I was the general manager for mobile properties, both U.S. and international for eBay, so helping that particular brand and its customers transition to a mobile first era. Right before that, at a personal level, I was dealing with chronic Lyme disease for 5 to 6 years. And then this realization that the patient and the consumer are not necessarily two separate species, but rather one human leading parallel lives, and that there was so much upside to be had for that consumer experience and the patient experience to converge. That's at its core. That's the fundamentals of us wanting to embark on the mission that we have for the last 10 years. And I don't think there's any one partnership that epitomizes our pursuit of that mission as what we did with Cindy and her team. She pursued this this particular way of getting to the patient way before it was a twinkle in the eye for a lot of the brands out there. Today, it's very much part of the zeitgeist. Everybody wants to talk about DTP. But I assume it went well past or well beyond the 2020 timeframe when we started working together, right? What had you sort of, venture into the unknown, if you will, right? At a time when most pharma brands were primarily looking at acquiring patients through more traditional channels, field sales force, et cetera.
Well, Deepak and I laugh when, the front page of the journal and everything was Lilly Direct. We looked at each other and we said, we've been doing this for years. Like, it's great that now, to your point, like DTP is really being thought of. Look, I come from 30 plus years in pharma, very traditional big pharma background, until I moved into, founding my own businesses, operating more on the innovative side. We created a category first FDA approval for women's health. Like I said, I'd sold that company to a big pharma player, and they were going to apply the classic playbook, right? They had a sales force kind of sizing of about 150. They would take it to market, even though there wasn't a predicate product to go buy data off of, there was a targeting exercise of who is the likely prescriber, et cetera, et cetera. And I'd sold that business. They ended up not launching the product, and I got it back. And I think about those intervening years, really watching, technology evolved, the sort of consumerism of the world, the expectation of Amazon arriving on my doorstep within 2 days. And I'm this consumer, maybe a little bit older, but, I think of, this expectation in the world today on consumers. And so when I got the product back, my instinct was not the traditional playbook. It is, how do you meet her where she is? How does every single sort of decision process that we make as a brand start with her at the center of it and how she wants to receive this care? She is really, especially I think in a category first, the master of her own destiny, right? She's going to take a proactive approach in wanting this product, and we're seeing this in the industry, right? Patient-elected care, how they're really driving decisions through the healthcare system. So how did she want to experience this? She liked the idea of having a consult from the comfort of her couch, where she didn't have a blush factor bringing up the conversation. She liked the idea of being able to have it delivered to her doorstep. She's busy. She doesn't want to go to the pharmacy and pick up, this product. Like all of those things being true to who she was, everything in our thought process was, how do I meet her where she is? And I think when you do that, or when you're in an industry like healthcare, which has always just been this way, right? Who do you look to teach you the new way? And my answer was Deepak, who's built e-commerce, because that's really the thought process we need to have. Not it's always been done this way, but what is the better way of doing it? So that was it. It was about having her have the best possible experience.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, right? Because in those days, we literally launched Addy on our platform in the depths of the COVID shutdown,
Yes.
right? So, partly out of necessity, but the timing couldn't have been any better because otherwise, reticent consumers were more than willing to go online to get access to things that they needed. It's worth pointing out that there were 3 hallmarks to your vision as to what that direct patient experience would look like. One, how closely it mimicked things that you bought online, right? It was a seamless experience, and you and your team put a lot of thought and energy into ensuring that some of the best practices with e-commerce, for instance, you don't get the consumer to enter the same bit of information multiple times,
right?
Or that if you have more than 2 things for a consumer to choose from, I notice that I'm deliberately using the term consumer and not patient because, the consumer came first, and they're not necessarily 2 separate entities, right?
That's right.
The idea that if you have more than 2 call to actions or more than 2 buttons to choose from or options to choose from, that leads to attrition. Or that the biggest barrier, now that you've built a great shopfront, I should say, or like an e-commerce storefront, the next biggest hurdle to the patient getting on therapy is price,
right?
And how you focused on that. And what to me was not foreign at that time, which is a digital channel intrinsically lends itself to being measured for performance using digital means. So that means that you can sort of instrument it every step of the way to see what the patient or consumer experience looks like, and then continue to iterate on it. So the receptivity to data, the fact that the platform would get you that insight that you could then act on, all of those stood out as hallmarks for me. It might be worthwhile digging into some of the lessons learned, right? Meaning, why did you, now that you've explained the why behind it, it would be good to get into sort of what did you learn from it in a way that informs some of the decisions, including any sort of blind alleys that you had to do a U-turn from?
Yeah. I love the data, right? The data is unlike anything else. If you think about this very impersonal experience we have with the consumers, I think you're right, consumers of our products, this is a way to really be connected to them through the entire journey and get insights that we wouldn't otherwise have. I'm going to keep going back to the world of yesteryear that I began my career in versus, I think, the world of today. And, things that have surprised me are some of those insights, right? That I could even have access to that because we send them into the Wild West, so to speak, right? Very disconnected from our brand. And then we don't really have any way to, wrap our arms around what happened along the way. Like, where did we either lose them? How do we recapture them? So I think that, from the starting point, I should have said this in the why. I wanted her to have easy access, right, on her own terms, in the way that she consumed other brands. And I think the lessons were, in many ways, like, how do you just help, like, allow her to make one decision at a time, right? This consumer, like, make this one call. So to your point, you're getting insights at every step of the process, we in this industry buy data, it's a little bit, lagged. It's really only about fulfillment. And here I see her like come to our doorstep, and then I see every point along that funnel in which she may drop, right? She may say, nope. And like all of that is informing us creating a better experience. And so I think that to me, maybe not even all of these rules, Apple Pay, like how crazy, right? At a moment in time, we had this idea, like, why are we not integrating payment mechanisms that she's using in other consumer sites? Like, is there a trust if she gives a credit card versus like, there's so many little moments. And I think as we've gone along, what's so beautiful is that you're getting these insights that let you just make, just a tiny click of the dial closer to let them guide you, right? That's the answer. Always meet them where they're at. So we can click it just one step closer to the way that they want you to meet them where they are. And I mean, that's really, for me, at this point, we're entering a frontier of customization that I think we would have never dreamed of at the beginning, right? We built this funnel, but now it's just getting better and better and more precise through time.
Refining the experience by looking at what the insights have to tell you, right? There was that thread that I want to pull on with the Apple Pay, right? So, the streamlined experience is great, right? You want the patient experience of buying Addie to closely mimic her buying something that catches her fancy on Instagram. She clicks through, and most of her information, including credit card, et cetera, is pre-filled. But then she gets to the checkout page, and then there's that, there's often that sticker shock, right?
Sure.
So e-commerce brands over time have really understood the price points at which conversion happens, pull-through happens, all of that. How did you, today when you look at the landscape of most DTP offerings, albeit they're fairly new in this journey, you see a lot of them come in with a cash price, often, $300-$400. Some of them are, the brands that are more in the news, their offerings are a step up from where things used to be a couple of years ago. But the patient, once they get to the end of that purchase funnel, so to speak, they see this checkout page with that $400 staring at them. I have to believe that, there was significant attrition at that point, right? How did you folks think about what's the right mix between, cash versus insurance? Any thoughts to offer there?
Well, look, I think this is actually one of the misconceptions. I think DTP is considered by a lot of companies as a cash-only strategy, right? I think that they consider it maybe a more expensive customer acquisition, and my experience has been the opposite. Actually, my goal from the get-go with you, and I think part of why I've loved our partnership with Phil, is that with access being a guiding principle, I also believed her insurance should cover it, right? Which it should, and it does, actually, the majority of the time. And so it was very important for me to have a partner who wasn't just, I think, DTP is overly simplified if we just think of it as a cash-based consumer model, and that's what we do, right? Like the beauty of this is that you've got an ability at the end of that rainbow to really check her insurance and to give her that optionality if it isn't, as opposed to, again, hoping and praying she's standing at a counter in retail and you've got a conscientious pharmacist who's either exploring if there's a copay offering or that, right? Like in that world, you might lose them completely. And in this world, I think you're really in a concierge kind of way saying, let me help you, let me check this. And then if not, let me offer. And we thought of things like, even in the scenario in which her, insurance doesn't cover it, which by the way is giving us important insights from a plan perspective, from a geo perspective, we started offering bundling, right? We thought, well, she's sort of disadvantaged right now. in this scenario. So how do we make this better for her? And, even offering, like, I think both of us were a little bit surprised how many patients opted for that bundle. Again, she's driven by convenience, again, that deliver to my doorstep, make it simple. How do I get this best kind of savings perspective? So those were, I think, some of our insights along the way.
Yeah, it's interesting how you articulated that, right? So there is a need, and that a person for whom that need manifests doesn't necessarily sort of label or identify themselves as a patient, but rather a consumer,
Yes.
right? Which is their sort of default mode of existence. And so then from there they go, what's the shortest and easiest and most affordable path to getting access to this thing that will make my life easier?
That's right.
And the playbook for that has been well established through e-commerce. So you and your team constantly ask the question, how closely can we mimic what's known, what works exceptionally well,
right.
and sort of built on that. Any other lessons around a payment or the user experience itself? Or I'm happy to switch gears and talk about our point of view on what sort of the building blocks look like, what it took for us to enable something like this.
Well, I think that's important. I think we give your expertise here, like, what are those building blocks? Like, how do you think about technology building blocks in this specifically? Like, what is an optimal DTP? I think a lot of times in just talking to other friends in the industry who are thinking about, putting this into practice, and I'll share some views on that, of what I think this future looks like. But I think there's a little bit of a forcing function of, like, we want the consumer to do this. And I think that what I've learned is, no, the consumer is going to do what the consumer is going to do, meet them there, watch those insights, iterate. But I think nobody can sort of articulate this better than you, Deepak, on how you think through, even with clients like us, how you get us into that headspace.
I would love to. The one perspective that's that might be additive in this case is sort of the brand's perspective, right? So this, of course, Cindy, you talked perfectly about the patient part and what they're looking for, their expectations. From the brand's perspective, what's the opportunity? And I'll certainly get back to your question. The opportunity for the brand is once in a generation opportunity to find that incremental customer. So Cindy's patient in this case is somebody who would otherwise, with high probability that she wouldn't have gone to a doctor because of the blush factor, so to speak,
that's
right?
Fair. Yes.
So finding that incremental patient online, we know today that there is an immense opportunity to find the incremental patient online. Not only that patient can be found online, but acquiring that patient compared to the traditional means of acquiring that patient, I think it's vastly cheaper online, meaning you're finding them using traditional marketing models and customer acquisition, patient acquisition models, the playbooks for which are well established at this point. So when you put those two together, and then you look at other downstream metrics that brands care about, brand P&Ls care about, like gross to net, and the overall sort of the value play, I think that direct to patient, when looked through the lens of the patient, offers enormous opportunity to the brand to get their innovation into the hands of a lot more people who want to take those products to improve their lifestyles. We think of the building blocks in terms of very not dissimilar at all from that of an e-commerce experience. It's essentially like the three legs of a stool, if you will, right? So the one part of it is the user experience. So we like to view the world in terms of epochs or generations, right? So the first generation DTP 1.0, as is currently manifest with a lot of brands, except I do think that Cindy and team have moved on to 2.0. So the contrast is illustrative, right? So 1.0, the user experience is disjoint. So you have a brand page, but there's numerous call to action. It's not very clear how the patient translates intent to purchase and obtaining the product. So there's multiple layers of vendors that they need to sort of jump through multiple hoops, and the experience itself is not integrated. They have to enter in the same bit of information multiple times, further causing attrition or drop-off. So getting that user experience to be seamless and branded, meaning the patient is here for a product. The journey is to getting to the end of that, to the end outcome, which is having the product delivered to them. It needs to be as seamless and confidence inspiring as possible, right? So what does that experience look like? It's one brand. The transition from telemedicine to hub to fulfillment and future refills need to look like very closely mimic e-commerce, right? So that's one. The other would be ensuring that now that you've built an amazing storefront, that when it gets to the checkout page, when the patient sees the lowest possible price, the odds that patient is going to start therapy and continue to stay on therapy is immensely improved.
Yes.
And when all means have failed to secure coverage through the insurer, cash becomes a fallback option. So in the 1.0 era, you often see cash as the default option. We at Phil have extensive statistics as to what that curve looks like, the elasticity curve in terms of pull-through or adherence as a function of price. And it starts to get pretty steep once you start getting past the high double digits. So for a product that's priced at, say $400, and as long as it's not one of those products that you have to take to save your life, metaphorically speaking and literally speaking, most often you're leaving behind 80-90% of your patient base. This is an educated guess. So our sense is that, yes, the great user experience is one leg of the stool. In a year or two, more than half of Americans will identify themselves as Gen Z or millennials, and for them, this is the e-commerce experience is the default experience. So we got to get that right. But then when you get to the end of the experience, if the price tag has an extra zero on it, then conversion suffers, right? So that's what we have to fix, and that's a combination of insurance and cash, but leading with insurance and cash being a fallback, right? And then lastly, data, right? Our view is that in order to acquire patients online, you have to understand what demographics convert well. Of course, you do it anonymously and in a way that's compliant, but you'll see that, for instance, a patient that converts very well or a demographic that converts very well on the telemedicine side doesn't necessarily convert very, very well at the bottom end of the funnel when it comes to fulfillment. An example could be, a 25-year-old who might click through and be okay paying that $20 consult fee for the telemedicine visit might not convert as well when they see the final price tag at the checkout page. Whereas somebody, perhaps in their 40s, would be more reticent to try out the telemedicine experience. It doesn't come naturally to them. But then when they do get to the bottom of the funnel, just by virtue of being farther along in life, they may have the means to pay for that price tag. So, but if you're looking in data in silos and start spending acquisition dollars online, seeing the elephant, the elephant in the six blind men story, right? Where you assume that it's a part of the, you're not able to see the whole consumer or the whole patient, and sort of, spend marketing dollars assuming it's a 25-year-old or 40-year-old. Odds are that your spend is going to be not as high in terms of ROI, right? So I think the ability to look at data to adjust your user experience, adjust price points, that makes up the third leg of the stool, in our opinion. So I think that makes for DTP 2.0.
Yeah.
Where you're not hopping across multiple sites, where you are more likely than not to pay the covered out-of-pocket price. And then lastly, the brand is able to continuously improve your experience, bring more patients into this experience, because the data gives them a level of visibility that the traditional marketing models would not afford them.
It's our most efficient way to go out and get a customer. I mean, I think for us, as we got this back and thought through, efficiency without thinking of the capital intensity to go out and build a sales force, like actually starting with DTP, which is a bit of my, like, what is the future look like? Like, there's not a world in which I would launch a brand today in which I wouldn't lead with DTP. I would lead with DTP, see everything it informs me. It would actually help me build Salesforce sizing and structure. I would identify on a geo basis areas that were really going, coverage, right, that was really working. Like, it would actually, that would be my 1.0 in a launch scenario in the modern times. I would want to do that so that I could deeply understand my consumer and really start to know how to meet them, even if I'm going to then deploy the more traditional playbook. Like, this would tell me so much about how to do that, most effectively. And I think we shouldn't, one of the things even going through this, and I think Deepak has, appropriately, like, we have fun challenging each other. Make no mistake, the consumer doesn't see the distinction, right? Once they go into a funnel, like, if something isn't working on his end, I'm going to hear it and vice versa. But I think, we make ideas or we tell ourselves stories like she's not going to want to, in my world, it's always a she, sorry, but the end consumer is not going to want to, like, have a subscription model. But in fact, that's exactly why they're doing this. They want convenience. Do we appropriately, inside of all compliance, make sure we wave at her and we say, hey, this is a refill and you have an opportunity here, opt out, opt out, opt out. Like, all of those things I think we're having an important conversation about right now in the industry. But, like, she actually wants that convenience. She wants to know that her refill is showing up before she, heads out for vacation. Like, all of those things, and the mechanism even to go, if she forgets to fill, right, fill it, like, and say to her, hey, did you forget or are you out? Like, that's an unbelievable opportunity, again, in the traditional, I call it the Wild West, so to speak, of most of our industry, of losing them into the Wild West. We don't get to see any of these things. So you would never have that same opportunity.
That's well said. Should we take some questions? Yes. Okay. Well, we have a few on chat, but I'd love for people to say hello, and yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
We're diagnostics for BDP. Question about this concept of insurance versus cash fallback. What is the mechanism you're using to evaluate some insurance and then fall back?
I think that's a great question, and I think that once again, when we're building a new interface, we always look to models that have worked elsewhere, sort of borrowing from playbooks that have worked elsewhere. In this particular case, I think DTP 1.0, the disconnect might be that you have a telemedicine vendor and then you go to fulfillment. Whereas in traditional specialty light products, which most of these products would fall under that definition, you have some sort of a patient access module there, or a service provider, colloquially called a hub service, a hub light, and the prime value add there would be for them to navigate insurance, and that for these sort of products, especially the ones that are relatively new to market, that typically requires numerous interactions between the prescriber, patient, brand, and certainly the payer, meeting step edit requirements. In the past, would have required those step edit requirements to be submitted by the prescriber. So there's a long tail of prescribers. And so the brands have solved this using hub services, and again, not to show for what we do, but that's part of the formula, without which you're essentially sending the patient to a fulfillment model, and by definition, they're not able to get that covered, right? Because most of these products do require more than just a prescription for the payer to pay for the drug, right? So I think that would be. I didn't get too much into it because we didn't want to speak about what we did versus shed more light on DTP 2.0 as a broader opportunity. But I do think that engine that works with that coordinates with these various entities, especially the payer and the prescriber, in this case telemedicine, to get that drug covered is the secret to showing the the $20 or the covered price way more often than the $400 price point. I'm sure that I may not have specifically addressed your domain or your product, but it's very fungible. We should probably close, but on a question that's easily can be construed as a statement, right? From Alex, this is easy AF. She is scrolling Instagram at night, low libido. Otherwise, she would be busy with other things. Just show her the meta ads.
Say that one more time. Is it easy? I mean, listen, again, meet the consumer where they are. Although Deepak and I had a funny conversation about my mom who's in her 80s, and I'm like, do not underestimate Karen Eckert's mad skills on Facebook. Like, I think we think this is only a particular age band, and I think consumerism today, I challenge anybody in here, do your parents have Amazon boxes sitting outside their doorstep? Because if they do, they actually expect this experience now as well, at least as an option. And it is the option that we lead with. That is the foot we go forward on in everything. So I can't say enough about, I think, how important it has been to our core business. We are smaller, like an innovative company with a category first. Like, how did we get started? And DTP dominates for us, even in the offering of, a traditional program as well. And it informs all of those decisions around what we put in place.
A lot of fun. Yeah,
yes,
thank you.
It's been fun, yeah. Deepak. I appreciate it.
Really appreciate it. Okay, we're going to be around for a few minutes. If some of the folks who asked questions or others wanted to chat, we would love to. Thank you.
Thank you.